On February 25, 2022, a routine maintenance operation turned into a horrifying ordeal for 5 experienced divers in Trinidad and Tobago. They were sucked into a 30-inch oil pipeline at immense speed, facing an unimaginable fight for survival.
Into an undersea pipeline in Trinidad are only serving to amplify the grief and horror suffered by the divers' families and the nation.
Picture this: you're part of a skilled diving team, undertaking routine maintenance on a dormant oil pipeline. On February 25, 2022, this was the reality for 5 divers from LMCS at the Berth 6 platform in Pointe-à-Pierre, Trinidad and Tobago. The team, comprising Faisal Kurbin, Kazim Ali Jr., Rishi Nagasar, Yusuf Henry and Christopher Budrum, were tasked with a job they had performed countless times before. The pipeline, owned by Paria Fuel Trading Company, was a critical infrastructure component designed to transport oil from Berth 6, where ships unload their cargo, to Berth 5, the refinery. Though the line wasn't in active service, it required regular maintenance to ensure safety and functionality. The divers used a specialized diving bell, an 8-foot cube, providing a dry, pressurized workspace underwater to perform their tasks. 2 weeks prior, an inflatable plug had been installed to prevent oil contamination. This plug was pressurized, holding back significant amounts of air. The process of releasing this plug required precise execution and constant monitoring due to the delicate balance of pressures involved. On this particular day, however, things went terribly wrong. The divers began their work as usual. They meticulously set up their equipment, ensuring everything was in place for a smooth operation. The diving bell was lowered into position over the pipeline, and the air tube, connected to the surface, pumped air into the bell, creating a pressure pocket that forced out the ocean water. The team, confident in their experience and preparation, removed their gear and prepared to release the inflatable plug. Ali Jr. handed the wrench to his crewmates, who began loosening the valve. Suddenly, the difference in pressure between the high-pressure air in the diving bell and the low-pressure air in the pipeline created a deadly suction force. In an instant, the tranquil workspace turned into a nightmare. The immense force of the suction pulled the divers, their equipment, and a torrent of water into the pipeline. The diving bell, once a safe haven, became a trap. The men were hurled through the narrow, oil-coated pipe at incredible speed, disoriented and fighting for their lives. Christopher Budrum, the sole survivor, later recounted the moment of terror when the plug was released and the chaotic whirlpool that followed.
I feel like instead of sinking in water, I feel like I was floating, like it had no gravity. Within a second, it was like tornado, everything just spinning and beating you up, and it happened so fast, you couldn't react. The only thing I remember able to do was cover my head in the fetal position. I didn't even remember actually getting pulled in the pipe. I just remember getting pulled through the pipe at unbelievable speeds.
Trapped inside the 1,200-foot-long pipeline, the divers faced a grim reality. Disoriented and injured, they knew their chances of survival were slim. The air pocket provided a brief respite, but they had to keep moving. The thick, oily residue coated everything, making progress difficult and painful. Christopher Budrum, the least injured of the group, took charge. He placed his feet on Kazim's shoulders and instructed Faisal at the back to push. Linked together, they began their excruciating journey through the pipe. The darkness was suffocating, and the burning sensation in their eyes and throats added to their misery.
Inside it was like an unbelievable nightmare. The eyes burning. Every time you try to open your eyes, it's burning. You're pitch black, you can't see nothing. Your throat burning, the ears ringing, your body sore.
As they crawled through the sludge, Boudram noticed the oxygen tanks with regulators. He warned his crewmates about the dangers of breathing the air inside the pipe and advised them to take small sips from the tanks. This cautious approach was necessary to keep clear oxygen in their system and avoid delirium. Despite their efforts, the water level inside the pipe continued to rise. The men struggled to breathe and move, their progress painfully slow. Injuries and exhaustion weighed them down, but they pressed on, driven by the hope of survival. Communication was difficult, but they encouraged each other, sharing whatever hope they could muster.
Can't for you! Right there. Right there, Will. Can't. Everything alright with you? No. Any limbs break? Your leg, alright. 5. Anything happen to you? Yeah. A 5? No, why? Yusuf, anything happen to you? Yeah, boy. What happened? Alright.
Boudram moved forward to check the water level, discovering a horrifying truth. The next segment of the pipe was completely submerged. With only 2 oxygen tanks for 5 people, it wasn't safe to proceed. Boudram had to make a heart-wrenching decision. He informed his crewmates of the situation and decided to go ahead alone to get help. The men agreed it was their only chance. They gave Boudram one of the oxygen tanks and wished him luck. Boudram promised he would return for them and set off, unsure of his direction and how much air he had left. The submerged section was treacherous, and he swam through the oily water, hoping to find another air pocket. Boudram's journey was a desperate fight for survival. He clambered through the pipe, his diving instincts on high alert. As his oxygen ran low, he collided with another metal object, an oxygen tank. He quickly found the regulator, but it had no mouthpiece. Desperately, he pushed the whole thing into his mouth, taking a relieved breath of air. Knowing he couldn't stop, Boudram pressed on with all his strength. He entered another air pocket, but his escape was far from over. The pipe was filled with flooded sections and air pockets, each one a potential death trap. His determination drove him forward, even as his body screamed in protest. As Boudram swam towards what he hoped was berth 6, exhaustion and fear gripped him, and his lungs burned with every breath. But he knew he had to keep going. The lives of his crewmates depended on his success. Each stroke was a battle against the thick, oily water and his own weakening resolve. Boudram's journey was a test of endurance and sheer willpower. The pipe's narrow confines and the suffocating darkness made every inch feel like a mile. He relied on his training and instincts, pushing his body to its limits. The air in his tank was running out, and he knew he had little time left. In a stroke of luck, Boudram found another air pocket. He surfaced, gasping for breath, and took a moment to gather his strength. His mind raced with thoughts of his crewmates, still trapped in the pipeline. He had to move quickly, but every part of his body protested against further exertion. Determined to survive, Boudram pressed on. He found another oxygen tank and continued his journey. The pipe seemed endless, and each new segment brought fresh challenges. The water levels fluctuated, and the air pockets were few and far between. But Boudram's resolve never wavered. He knew he had to make it out alive. Boudram finally caught the sight of the bend in the pipe. his last hope for survival. He had to choose between two paths, one leading to berth 5, sealed off by a plug, and the other to berth 6, where they had started. With his remaining strength, he kicked off towards the riser, hoping it was the right choice. Budrum reached the last flooded section before the riser. His heart pounded with a mix of fear and hope. He heard a voice calling his name. It was Faisal, following him through the pipe. Faisal begged him to wait, but Budrum knew he couldn't stop. Time was running out, and they had to get out of the pipe. Budrum pushed forward, reaching the bend in the pipe. This was the moment of truth. He had to choose the right path or risk sealing their fate. With a final burst of strength, he kicked off towards the riser, praying it would lead to safety. The journey was grueling, but he was determined to make it out. As Budrum neared the end of the pipe, his body screamed in protest. He was on the brink of collapse, but he couldn't give up. He thought of his crewmates, still trapped and waiting for rescue. Their lives depended on him. With one last effort, he reached the top of the pipe and surfaced. Budrum's escape was nothing short of miraculous. He had survived the ordeal, but the nightmare was far from over. He immediately alerted the authorities and recounted the harrowing details of their situation. Rescue teams were dispatched, but time was running out for the remaining divers. The rescue effort was a race against time. Divers from LMCS and other agencies worked tirelessly to locate the trapped men. They knocked on the pipe, hoping for a response. The faint sounds of knocking back provided a glimmer of hope, but the conditions inside the pipe were dire, and every second counted. Inside the pipe, the trapped divers clung to hope. They could hear the rescue efforts above, and the sounds of knocking gave them a lifeline. But their injuries and the harsh conditions made survival difficult. The air was thick with oil fumes, and the water levels continued to rise. Communication was limited, and the men had to conserve their strength. The rescue teams faced immense challenges. The pipeline's narrow confines made it difficult to navigate, and the risk of further collapses was high. Despite their best efforts, reaching the trapped divers in time seemed increasingly unlikely. The divers' oxygen supply was dwindling, and the rising water levels added to their peril. As the hours turned into days, the hope of finding the divers alive began to fade. Finally, after days of tireless work, the bodies of the 4 remaining divers were recovered. The scene was heart-wrenching, and the loss was deeply felt by everyone involved. Autopsies were conducted, but determining the exact time of death was challenging. Some officials believed the men survived until Saturday, while others speculated that one might have endured until Monday. In the wake of the incident, a commission of inquiry was launched to investigate the circumstances that led to the tragedy. The goal was to uncover the truth and ensure that such a disaster never happened again. The inquiry focused on the actions of Paria Fuel Trading Company and LMCS, examining their safety procedures and decision-making processes. The Paria Diving Incident left a lasting impact on Trinidad and Tobago. As we remember Faisal Kurbin, Kazim Ali Jr., Rishi Nagasar, and Yusuf Henry, we honor.
I'm trying to come up. General. Yeah. Yeah? Right behind you, man. All right behind you? You're right behind me? Yeah. Ah? You don't know when to come up? It's not coming up. Who making all that noise there? Come on, all that we let's figure it out. We gotta go. We gotta start moving. Yeah. Where you at? I don't know. I'm trying to come up. Trying to come up. But don't worry, all is good. All is good, I'm gonna get through this. I'm trying to come out. Huh? Yeah. Who is that boy there? Yusuf? Oh, Yusuf? How long you have to walk before you meet Friday? You and Friday was together all the time?
Right now, we are fighting with that. Right now.
Who else